Okay, so welcome everybody to the Yalla podcast. My name is Alon.
I'm Elik.
And today we have with us Dan Ben Ishai and Ayelet Ben Ishai, who are now friends, new friends. And I will just say that we are all part of a WhatsApp group that is called It Says Israel on Our Passport.
Yeah.
And I think that is enough for now. So welcome Dan, welcome Ayelet.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Hello, nice to be here.
Nice to see you guys.
And before we start, Elik, do you want to explain just about the podcast and the goal of the podcast?
Yes. So we started not so long ago. It feels already long.
It's been a few months now.
A few months, the One State Solution podcast, which is an anti-Zionist podcast that we discuss the situation, the history, the present.
Situation.
Yeah, the future. It's all recorded during the genocide in Gaza. It's part of our resistance also to what's going on. And it's also part of the attempt to create a better future for all the inhabitants of this land. However, whatever their national identity, religious identity. And the podcast started in conversation between us, but we understood that we want to make the conversation wider with more people, with Israelis, Palestinians, and people from all over the world. Because we feel that the conversation between us is the beginning, that we have to talk, that we have to figure out things together. You don't need to be an expert or anything. We're all just bring our sensitivity, our care, and our and our thoughts.
Yes.
And yeah, maybe now you want to tell how we met, and then we start to unpack your stories as well.
Yeah, happily. Well, since I hate it that this is how we have to say, since what is happening is to say since the 7th of October, there's no other way of saying it. So since the 7th of October, I've been
The current crisis,
very much,
we can say maybe.
very much on YouTube, trying to find voices that appeal to me, that make me feel not so alone. And I started listening to a lot of Daniel Mate and Gabor Mate, and I also participated in there was a big Zoom with Gabor Mate. And then it popped up on my YouTube, these two Israelis guy, this podcast called Yalla with Daniel Mate. And I listened to it, and it started with Elik playing his violin. And I looked and I'm like, I think I know this person. And I was like, did we study together? I was like, no, he went to school with my brother. And I really remembered that because I also went to that same school. And I watched the podcast and was like, wow, they are saying everything that I am feeling. And I started watching all of the episodes. And then I wrote to Elik, and mostly I was just amazed by the song that he had created. And I'm a musician and I wanted to collaborate. And
it's still
it
going
took
to
some
happen.
time.
It didn't happen yet, but we're gonna get there soon.
It will happen. Yes. A musical collaboration is in the works. And then I reached out to Alon as well, and Alon already knew Dan from
not really deeply, but just I think we saw each other on Facebook. We even exchanged some comments. Yeah.
Yes, I want to tell how I became aware of your existence, Dan, because I was looking for like-minded people who are very rare these days in our area. And I started, I was exposed to some of your posts where I think they are very deep and interesting, and we will talk about it more. And basically, you wrote about the history of what is going on here, and also compared it to the history of what was going on in Nazi Germany and other places like that. And I thought it was very eye-opening, and I really appreciated the way that you spoke. And then we closed this circle. Very interesting. Yes.
Yes. So then we created the WhatsApp group.
Yes.
And decided to meet on Zoom and then to record this episode. After Elik and Alon heard our stories and said, "Wow, we need to interview you." So
yes.
Here we are.
So I will also say that one of the main reasons that we wanted to interview you, other than the fact that you are interesting and cool people, is that I believe that you have really telling stories about, let's say, stepping out of the cult ideology of Zionism. And this will be the main topic of our conversation today. So maybe let's start. Dan, you haven't spoken much yet, so start please by telling us like your personal history and mainly related to Zionism and just the beginning, okay?
Yeah, sure. So my parents came here to Israel from the former Soviet Union. My father is from the Ukraine, my mother from Russia. And I was born here in this country soon after they got here. They got here in 1988. I was born 1989. And my father, he grew up in the Soviet Union in the Ukraine. He was Jewish. He had a hard time for being Jewish. He was blocked from a scientific career in the academy. He was bullied at school. He knew that he wanted to leave that society and that country and come here since early on. He wasn't able to. The Soviet Union would not allow Jews to leave the country en masse. But towards the end of the Soviet Union, the end of the 80s, there was some liberalization and they were able to leave. And they came here. I was born already here. And yeah, and then they found some employment in the south in a town called Arad. My father worked in a factory, my mother as well. So they were working class, even industrial working class, kind of classical working class, but their consciousness was not very critical, not very radical because of their situation where they left a society where they felt alien. They came here, they did feel welcomed. Of course, there were problems. There was a lot of racism against by the more kind of the more native Jewish population at this point towards the new immigrants. Of course, we're all immigrants, but they were the new immigrants, and there's always some conflict there. But still, the state received them. The state wanted them here. The state needed them as a demographic weapon against the Palestinians. And so they were welcomed. They were received in centers. I don't know how to translate this, Merkaz Klita, but they were given some kind of housing for a while until they could settle. It wasn't like it wasn't like an experience, I think, like if you would just immigrate to the United States or something like that. You were received here. You were wanted here.
They weren't refugees.
They weren't refugees. You were taught the language. They sought employment for you. Of course, they couldn't offer very good employment for most of these immigrants because it was a huge immigration wave, millions of people. A lot of them had education, had higher education, like my parents. So a lot of them experienced they went down in their socioeconomic, yeah, exactly, in their socioeconomic situation. But my parents still, they felt welcome, they felt grateful. And I think the most important thing is that they could expect that their children, me and my sister, would already grow up to be 100% Israelis, middle class Israelis. So that gave them a more patriotic consciousness. That's why I think this is my analysis. The facts are that they were patriotic, they were Zionists. Although they were working class, they did not identify with working class struggles. their idea was just let's work hard and let's better our own situation. There wasn't anything like class solidarity. And they hated the Palestinians. They saw them as the enemy. They came here just as the first Intifada broke out, 1988.
Yes.
So they came here, Zionists, believing in this story, just as the Zionist story started feeling its first doubts from within. I think the term post-Zionist arrived around that time, the 90s, the early 90s, something like that. With the first Intifada, those images of Israeli soldiers against Palestinian children with nothing but rocks, suddenly the whole myth was kind of shaken. And you had all these new historians, the revisionists, coming out, questioning the myths, the founding myths of Zionism. So it was a time, just as they finally arrived in Israel, they were ready to be part of the society. They found that society in doubt and under attack. And so they felt this combatant instinct to come to the rescue, to join that society, to be Zionists, to be even more Zionists than the Israelis. So they were actually on the far right. No empathy for the Palestinians.
Yeah.
And that's
I
very
don't think they would.
typical, right? To this wave of
Sorry?
this is very typical, right? To mentality of this wave of like immigration. I think, like, I don't want to be too generalizing, but I feel like I met this kind of mentality to many people who came in this time, like, you know, from the Soviet Union. And I think in a way in Israel, every wave that comes need to prove its loyalty by hating the Palestinians. It's kind of...
Yeah, it's an initiation ceremony, I would say. Yeah.
I think another point in kind of analyzing why certain segments of Israeli society are on this part of the spectrum or the other, also it's being in the periphery, geographically, economically, socially, which is where we were, and every immigration wave is in the periphery. And part of proving yourself is through the military. That's how you really prove you're Israeli. Even our Jewishness was questioned, actually with good grounds, like my mother wasn't Jewish.
Isn't.
Don't tell
Isn't
them.
Jewish. No, we're out. That's it. Everything is out. Today, everything comes out.
Yes.
I'm taking us all out of the closet. So yeah, so I do think it's typical. It's a complicated story because I've met other kinds of stories from that area. But that was our story for sure. Very right-wing Zionist. Now, I wasn't indoctrinated very consciously as a child. We didn't speak about politics in the home. I wasn't even aware of anything. Like, I didn't quite know that there were Palestinians. That word, there were Arabs, of course, but Palestinians, what is that? I didn't quite know that there were territories, occupied territories. Not very conscious at all. We didn't speak about it at home. Every now and later, I kind of found out that my parents are on the right, that they vote for a certain party, which was Moledet, by the way. That was back when
Moledet, can you please tell?
Wow, I didn't remember there was such party at all.
Yes, I also forgot about it.
There was a party called Moledet. The head of the party was Chavam Gandhi Ze'evi. His nickname is Gandhi, very ironically. Very militant, violent man, a military man who led this party. And the idea of the party was, their core idea was to transfer. That's a euphemism, really,
for ethnic cleansing, basically.
Yeah, to deport, to kick out not all Palestinians, only the Palestinians in the West Bank and in Gaza. So not as radical or not as extreme as Kahana, let's say, who wanted everyone out. This is a bit more, I don't know, but still very, very, very on the far right. They voted and they were actually active in that party. Yeah, and I remember my father, not that this would happen every day, but just it relates to what we're speaking about today. And I remember him once toasting Mavet La'Aravim, death to the Arabs. Yeah. That happened once. I remember him once explaining, I think to my sister, and the context was some kind of assault on Gaza. This happens every now and then, a bombing of Gaza. And he said something like, I'm not sure how to translate this, something like, when you exterminate a den of snakes, you don't differentiate between a baby snake and an adult snake. You can't. those kind of things. I want to defend, like it's a complicated story. I want to defend my father. I want to defend my parents. We have to have empathy for everyone
Yes.
in history and around us. There's a story there. It's not just that he was
But
evil
so
and he was a
many
good
people
man.
here
And
speak like that, so like, yeah.
yeah. But that was the environment. Now again, they didn't push that into me. My sister went to the left, to the Zionist left, just because as a youth she joined the youth movement Anor Haoved, which is a leftist Zionist, I would say kind of liberal,
Like socialists,
youth
right?
movement.
Socialists.
Supposedly socialist. This definitely have this symbolism of socialism,
Mhm.
but really liberal. If you want to understand really what they
Yeah,
are,
but
it's a
they
liberal
build-
kind of Zionist.
They have
Sorry?
they have these communes where everyone's sharing everything. Like I thought they're very like socialist communist.
100%. That's the history too. Like that's their ideas, and they learn about socialist kind of folklore and ideology, and they do communes and all of that. But in the end of the day, I don't feel like you can really be socialist and Zionist. And so
Of
they
course
end
not.
up being something like liberal Zionists, really,
Yes, okay.
in the way they vote, in everything, in the way they live. That's the bottom line of that. So my sister kind of found her tribe with those people.
And she went to the army with them.
And she went to the army with the same kind of and till today, that's her circle, her partner, family. That was her. Not so much for me. I did end up um, adopting or accepting very militant Zionist views around the age of my military service. So approaching my military service, I started being more conscious, thinking about those things.
Let us just say
And
for the audience that the age of military service is 18 for
Yeah.
Jewish Israelis. So just
Yeah.
so people understand.
yeah, so right around that time, I became more conscious, and the ideas that I ended up as if discovering on my own, but really I was influenced, of course, from my environment, was very right wing, and I joined the military very motivated. I wanted to be a fighter. I wanted to prove myself. I wanted to do more than the obligatory 3 years. I wanted to be an officer, and I was an officer. I wanted to fight. I wanted, honestly, to kill. Not like bloodthirsty or anything, but just you have to understand the world. We live in a world where there's bad people,
Yeah.
right? And I want to defend my country, and I don't want to shy away from that, and I want to prove myself. And I think I thought it was a good thing to kill bad people, and that was my mentality joining the military.
You also grew up on like action movies and
Yeah, well, that's a whole other, like, that's for my father. Again, they were tough people. They had a tough life. And my father grew up being a Jew in an environment that didn't always accept it. And he learned how to box early on, and he would street fight, and he would take no disrespect. He was a tough man, and he kind of imbued those values in me. So even though they didn't teach me any politics at home early on, they did give me those values that are in mythology, that is a right-wing mythology. Like, there's good people, there's bad people, and you should be generous and you should be kind to your own, to the good people. But when enemies attack you, you must not show weakness, because then they'll just want more and more and more. That was kind of the value system. And that was the movies that we would see, these American action movies. My father, I think, enjoyed me. I enjoyed them as a kid. I would watch them with my father. And Rambo,
Yeah.
these really
Sylvester
fascist, this
Stallone.
American fascism.
I also love
Yes.
that stuff.
Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
Today I look at those movies sometimes. I rewatch those movies critically, and I see how much they're expression of American fascism. It's fascinating, and I'm horrified
Yeah.
I grew up on them from a very early age.
Uh-huh.
So that was also the picture of masculinity that was put in front of me.
But I
Yeah.
think also like children, a lot of time it's kind of, I think like it's a thought I had now that Zionism fit this development age of children when they seek like clear stuff, clear definitions, good and bad, you know, and And I remember as a child that I loved that story of like we fought and we beat all the enemies and we were like, you know, it's appealing and it's fun to believe in this as a child, also as an adult. But
the question is, do you grow out of it? And I believe that one of the problems in Zionism is that so few people grow.
And they stay out in a very childish mentality in a way.
Okay, so let's keep the audience in suspense for the continuation of Dan's story. And let's ask Ayelet the same question. Please tell us about your childhood in Israel and how was it growing up, and how were you indoctrinated into Zionism, just to cut the bullshit.
Cut the bullshit, yeah. So I am the granddaughter of Holocaust survivors.
So
my grandfather on my father's side was from Belarus and has a very amazing heroic story of survival that was like the legacy of the Kagan family name. What's funny is that he chose, when he survived, not to move to Israel. The rest of who was left of his family, his cousins, moved to Israel and started working on kibbutzim. And he had a dream of becoming a very wealthy man. And he understood that if he stays in Israel, it's not going to happen. So he went to England and became a capitalist. And had invented like a certain type of shoe and just had like a bunch of factories for shoes and became wealthy. And there he met my grandmother and had my father. So my father came from upper middle class Jewish family in London.
Your grandmother, what was her background?
From my father's side?
You said you met your grandmother.
She was in London during the war, and I think her family was originally also from like Poland or something, but she was like British, and
they were upper class.
They were upper class, and my father, I think. Definitely the generational trauma passed through him. My grandfather didn't speak about his experience for many years until eventually he did. And my father experienced anti-Semitism as a child in London. And as a teenager, he came to Israel. And interesting, he came on the Yom Kippur War
on that
of
day.
73. And I think he was there while it was happening, and that somehow convinced him to come back, even though there was a war. And in his 20s, he left England. He was more of a spiritual, intellectual person than his family, and he longed for a place where he could live without Zionism, could have intellectual conversations about Judaism and learn Torah.
Without Zionism?
What did I say?
Without anti-Semitism,
Without anti-Semitism.
Okay.
Sorry.
Not so
he wanted to.
We talk a lot about the connections between anti-Semitism and Zionism.
It's all
that is a
confusing
different story.
Yeah. So he wanted to live in a place without anti-Semitism, and he wanted to be in a place where he could, explore his Judaism. And so he went to Israel at a very young age. My mother was born in Israel. Her mother is also a Holocaust survivor. Her parents died in the war, and she came to Israel as an orphan with her siblings, with like a huge love for this land and for the Jewishness and for the culture and for the language. This place that is saving her life.
Can you please elaborate, like, what age? This was after the war, right? That they came here, and like, what was their reasoning for coming? Like, what happened that pushed them to come here of all places?
Well,
No.
she was the daughter of rabbis, of a long lineage of rabbis from small towns in Poland, Ukraine. And her older sister taught her everything that the family knew about tradition and about religion. She taught her all the songs. And they tried to go back to Poland, and they were there in like a Soviet orphanage. And then there was the project of Harav Herzog to bring a bunch of orphan children from Holocaust survivors to Israel, and she was one of them. They came on this like mission to bring a bunch
is
of.
he related to the president? To the former president?
Is he?
Yeah, I think it is.
He is.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So this
Because
is I don't know much about
Yeah.
the grandfather of the present
the current
father,
yeah, Isaac Herzog.
his forefathers were rabbis for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, famous rabbis in Israel since the mandatory Palestine.
And my mother's father came from Hungary, and they left before the war on one of the illegal ships, and they went into the camp in Aklit, which is a seaside town in Israel.
Not
And
far
they had
from
to.
where
They
you
were
are now, right?
Yeah, not far from where we live now.
Yeah.
And they were in a camp there. And he fought in the Palmach in the Independence War of 48. And eventually, they were both integrated into Israeli society, working on kibbutzim, learning in the universities. And then they met in like the kibbutz, and then they met again in the university, and then they got married. And they're both.
Say one small comment. You said the Independence War of 48. I want to just mention that this is a very politically charged term, but I think this is a moment where people can see like Israeli culture, because we are used to calling this the Independence War.
Yeah.
And the Palestinians are used to calling this the Nakba.
It's the independence war or liberation war. Like
Yes.
My parents call it מלחמת השחרור.
Yes.
Yes.
Liberation war.
And this is part of the indoctrination that when we speak automatically, we will call it the Independence War or the Liberation War. But the Palestinians will call it the Nakba. Just wanted to put it out there, and please continue the story.
I just want to say in parentheses, since you opened this up,
Yeah.
I study history now. I guess we're going to talk about this in future. I study history and I focus on the conflict, and maybe 80% of my struggle is just to figure out what words to use. And like intelligently and morally, that's a lot of the work. Just what
Why do
words
we say it says Israel on our passport? Are we Israeli?
Yes.
Are we Jewish? What do those words even mean? It's very difficult to even talk about this without being highly politically charged.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like my background in summary is of very Jewish people, like people who really lived their Judaism in a religious way and saw Israel as a place of liberation, of a place where they can live freely, where they can not be persecuted, where they can be Jewish without it endangering their life.
And I think also like a very classical, respectable Zionist story, like Holocaust survivors, check. Fought in 1948, check.
Yeah.
A relative of yours was on the Exodus, the famous Exodus ship.
My grandfather was also on the Exodus. My grandfather as well.
Wow.
This is interesting.
Wow.
We might.
And my grandmother as well on the Exodus. So we're all,
Yeah.
Grandmother,
It's like, it's
got a
people
medal
who,
because of that.
what's heartbreaking is that these are people who wouldn't hurt a fly, they're amazing, wonderful people. And And they're spiritual people. Like my mother is a rabbi, and she, like, her story is of wanting to learn Torah in a place where she couldn't because she was a woman, and she had to really like find her way to study the Judaism in a way that she wanted to. And she had to go to America to find other branches of Judaism that also fit her spiritually and feministically, because both her and my father were more Orthodox when they were younger. I think my mother was influenced by a trip that she did to the East. She like she was one of the first people to like travel India and Nepal, which is something that like every Israeli does when they finish the army nowadays, to sort of forget their trauma for a bit. And she didn't go to the army. She did what's called Shirut Leumi, national service, because she was, I guess she also understood that she can't do that to herself, even though the army is an amazing thing, you know, the IDF, of course. And her little brother, my uncle, was in the Second Lebanon War. He was injured right at the end of his service and is like an IDF handicapped person to this day.
Yes.
I know that my aunt was like protesting against that war at some point to get the people out.
Oh, interesting. So you had like two different sides of the debate, let's call it, inside your family.
Not really, no.
It was just liberal Zionists, like still Zionists, but
Still Zionists. Still Zionists.
Yeah, no, I understand this, but
Yeah.
you said one family member actually went and fought in this war, and another family member was opposed to this war, right? So
No, she wasn't opposed. I don't think she was opposed to the war. I think this
Okay.
was the time in the Second Lebanon War that most of Israel,
or a good
or a good portion of it, was asking the
Yeah, okay.
government to save. And I think she was doing it because she's like, my brother is in there.
Yes,
I
okay,
want him
okay,
to
okay.
come out,
Okay.
you know?
Yes.
That was the
But I don't know so
mother.
much about that.
So,
So I'll talk more about myself personally.
Yes.
I grew up, I think I'm the third child in my family. I was the first daughter to my parents. And I think they really still just want me to be happy, which is amazing. And I don't think my parents are political people. I think they're very spiritual people. I think Judaism is like the way that they live their life. Torah is the most important thing to them. And that's how they express themselves artistically, intellectually, and spiritually. And I grew up with Judaism as like, this is our set of values. These are the boundaries that we keep. I only, starting I think 2 years ago, did I stop keeping Shabbat, which means like using electricity or cooking. Like I loved it because I was surrounded by people who loved it. And all of my friends and like most of my cousins stopped being religious after, I don't know, in their teenage years when they were soldiers. And I was like, I stuck to it because I loved it. And my parents managed to find a way to make us love it. And I think my family, out of the entire family, are the only family that are still religious. All of my brothers, they're all still religious. And my sister.
add like about your brother, because we learned in a school that was mixed, religious and non-religious.
This was in Jerusalem, right?
Yeah, and I had for a while a close relationship with him, and he was one of the only one that I felt that his religion identity is deep. Most of the people who went to this school like stopped being religious after a while.
Yeah.
And he had amazing knowledge, like he's super knowledgeable person, right? Like, and I remember we did a trip before the army, and all the trip back and forth, me and him was walking together and arguing, and we were talking. I was not an Anti-Zionist yet, but we were arguing and talking about history and religion. And I remember like I was.
So you were also like 19 at that time, something like that?
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
and and I was very impressed by the deepness of his like connection to the religion, and it was always had a reason, and he knew why, and he knew how to explain why he's connected to. Yeah, so I kind of
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
I don't know if you know, he's a scholar today.
He's
He's
a
a very
scholar now
successful. Yes,
of
he's
Judaism.
of
Of scripture.
biblical studies.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think back then he was already like really into like biblical research and yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, in high school he went to like the national Bible competition where you
Oh.
had to like he won 8th place or something like that. We were all
Yeah.
very proud of him.
Yeah.
It's a big
It's so crazy because it was all so normal to me. And now when I like look at it from the outside, I don't see the difference between the way that we live and like Christian family in Texas who like sit around the table and talk about Jesus, which like that's great, that's your life, but I don't see the difference. I don't see the difference. And my parents were in a sense also liberal because they wanted us to go to a school that integrates religious and non-religious people. And
Yeah, that's
we
how
lived in America for 2 years where my mother studied with a certain rabbi who started a new type of like new age Judaism called Jewish Renewal, which was supposed to be more spiritual, more feminist, more inclusive, more actual, like he would drive to synagogue in his car, you know?
Let me just
And
explain. Let me just explain something for the viewers who do not know that the Jewish religion there is Shabbat. Shabbat is every Saturday. It is the holiest day, and in Shabbat you should not use electricity. You should not do labor. You should keep Shabbat, and there are all kinds of isurim and mitzvot, like things that you can't do, things that you should do, and driving is one of the big no-nos, okay, of Shabbat in like traditional Judaism. So what you are saying is that they were very progressive, right? This is the message.
yes, because they wanted people to be Jewish in a modern world, and spiritual. And then my mom became one of the first female rabbis in Israel and started her own community where she could pray in the way that she wanted to pray. And
Which
that's
is,
where I
again,
grew up.
very highly irregular, right? Female rabbis is something that is it's not common in like traditional Judaism, or doesn't even exist in traditional Judaism, right?
It's a revolutionary in a way, right? In Israel, to be the first one to do it, it's like
Yeah. And now there are many more women rabbis than ever before, I think. But she was really one of the pioneers in Israel for that. And when we came back from living in America, I was 10 years old, and we came back to Israel. I went back to the same school, the religious, non-religious school. That was a traumatic moment for me because we lived in Boulder, Colorado, which is like this oasis of rich hippies in America, where everyone is really nice and weed is legal. And coming back to Israel was horrible because I was just bullied every day for having an American accent when I spoke Hebrew. I just couldn't connect to anyone. I wanted to be, like a feminist, and I got like a set of tefillin, this Jewish thing that you wrap around. It's like leather that you wrap around your arm and you put around your head. And like I got ones for my bat mitzvah, and I wanted to bring it to school, and people told me only men use it, and people told me you're not supposed to use it. And I just wanted to fit in, and people made it very hard for me to feel like I belonged.
in our school, in the school I was, the Keshet.
Yeah, we were a really fucked up class. I was so miserable there, and eventually I left and I went to a religious girls' school, which was, I was the first class of this school, and it was feminist because girls learned Torah there, and that's feminist. In retrospect, I don't think anyone knows what that word means really in these society. I don't think Zionists understand what feminism is.
I do
Because
want to make a comment that in Israeli society, girls being soldiers and fighting and killing Palestinians is considered something women empowerment and a feminist thing, and I think this is highly twisted, but this is very normal in Israeli society to express your feminism through military service and militarism in general.
Yes. And I remember our history lessons were about like medieval history, and then we learned about what's called the Chassidut, which is like I don't know how to translate that into English.
Hasidim, that's people.
It's like these a type of Jews that started in Europe, and then we learned. And I remember coming to either 11th grade or 12th grade, like really excited to learn about World War I. And then they were like, okay, so 1918, this is what I'm like, wait, there was a whole world war there. We're not going to learn about it. And they're like, no. We're like, oh, okay. And then we just learned about the Balfour Declaration and about the first people who came to Israel and built the state. And then we learned about the Holocaust. And that's it basically, and a bit about like the War of Independence, and that was it. Or only in retrospect I'm like, what, that's all I knew. And that was like the exam that we took, and I knew this history super well because I was a perfectionist student that worked really hard to get good grades. And I went to Poland with my school to the concentration
tell us a little
camps.
bit about this Poland trip, because we all know about it here, but our viewers might not understand the context.
Yeah, I remember my mother didn't want me to go because she thought I was too sensitive, and I wanted to prove that I'm not too sensitive, so I went. These are trips that happen in many schools in Israel where I don't know I think the parents need to pay for it. I don't think it's funded, but you go as an organized group with an Israeli tour guide, and you go from concentration to concentration camp. And in my situation, because it was a religious school, we went to visit graves of rabbis. So we went to like many Jewish graveyards, and we went to like synagogues in different cities in Poland. Yeah, we went to this site of like this famous story of a barn, in which the story was that like this Polish town, that the non-Jews turned on the Jews eventually, their own neighbors, and violently put everyone in, all the Jews in the barn, and lit it on fire. And that was like one of the most horrific stories that was hard. And we went to Majdanek, and we went to Treblinka, and we went to Auschwitz, and we went with Israeli flags everywhere, like wrapped around our shoulders. And we did a ceremony like every single place, in which we like read sad poems, and we sang Hatikva, which is the national anthem, and we sang I Believe That the Messiah Will Come every time. Wow. And we had like, we sang songs, and like there was this for me it was like such a powerful experience. We went to like a synagogue in Kiev, and it's like a museum now. And then we went out, and there was like another school who was doing a Poland trip, like a non-religious school, and we all started dancing together and singing together, and probably singing like Am Yisrael Chai. And it was like, oh, look, we're religious and non-religious people, and we're here together. You know, it's like it was very
so let me just
meaningful.
make all of this explicit. I think people can figure out, but I want to make it explicit. This is part of the system of indoctrination and propaganda of the Zionist ideology. They take the children when they are 16, 17, before they finish high school and go to the military or national service. They take them to show them their history, and their history is the history of victims, right? Victims of the Holocaust in Poland, in Ukraine, in Germany, whatever, mainly in Poland, all the concentration camps, all the extermination camps, but victims who became powerful and now come back with the flag of Israel, with the Star of David to show, yes, we are still here, we are now powerful, we have a military, we can defend ourselves, and you cannot do anything to us anymore. So this is mainly, I think this is the Zionist story
You never learn about the Holocaust without this conclusion of now we have a state of Israel, right? It's never separated. You can never draw your own conclusion about the Holocaust. Like that's the.
It's even built that way. In Jerusalem, there's the Yad Vashem Museum, which is the Holocaust Museum, and it's right next to Mount Herzl, which is the military cemetery.
Yeah.
It's like it's like they purposefully mix the two together. They're like, this is the conclusion, and this is the price that we keep paying, and that's okay. You know?
We are now almost we are approaching Holocaust Remembrance Day in Israel. And just so you understand the order of the days, the important days in Israel, so you have Holocaust Remembrance Day, and then 1 week later you have Memorial Day. For soldiers who were killed in battle, and then 1 day later is Israeli Independence Day. So you see the myth from Holocaust to army and then to independence. The whole myth of Zionism within 1 week instilled every single year to every single person, and especially to children.
But
now I want to give credit where credit is due. When I was 11, my parents sent me to a Jewish Muslim Christian program called Kids for Peace, where children are brought together from, I think, 4 children from every religion, and the Christian and Muslim children are Palestinian. And they get to know each other for like weeks and weeks and weeks, and then they go together to summer camp in America. And basically, like, it's dialogue groups for children.
And you went to this? And you went to this summer camp and all this?
I did this, yes. I did this when I was 11. My cousin went with me, and a good friend of mine. She's married to a Palestinian now.
Wow.
And she was part of Kids for Peace for many, many years. I didn't feel like the experience changed me. I think it did make me a more compassionate person, probably, but I enjoyed being with Americans again in the American camp more than anything, because I was traumatized by being back in Israel. I just wanted to be with fun and cute Americans. And the language was a huge barrier because we're not taught Arabic. We all had to speak English, and not all of the Palestinians could speak English. So there was a translator, and I just felt like I couldn't really connect when I couldn't really speak to the people. But I continued going to, my parents took me to like events of a place called Sulha, which is also like a interfaith gathering. And in our community, they would bring like Sufi people and Christian people, and like but it was never political. Like, it was always very spiritual and never really seeing things as they were. And in 2005, when it was the Hitnatkut,
disengagement from Gaza.
The disengagement from Gaza. so-called, and it was like wild here. There were people like there was whole thing of like people with orange stripes and then people with white and blue stripes, and people were very, very divided. And this girl at school came to me and she's like, "Are you right wing or left wing?" And I just said what I thought my parents were. I was like, "I'm left wing," and then she just went like this. Wow. And I had no idea what any of it meant. And I remember asking my mother, "What is the hitnatkut? What does this mean?" And I think whatever she said came in from one ear, went out from the other. And I was a dreamy child, still am, I think. You know, I'm a theater person, I'm a music person, I'm an artist, and like the suffering of the world was something that was so hard for me to hold, that I was like constantly protecting myself, constantly being protected. And then I decided to go to the army, even though my mother didn't want me to go to the army. And again, I thought she was like, "No, you're too weak." And then I'm like, "No, I will be part of this society. I have to serve my country. I have to do what I can." And I think nowadays, sometimes I like blame my parents for bringing me up in a Zionist home, and they keep telling me, "But we haven't. Like we brought you up to be compassionate and accepting of other people," and yet a part of me is like, it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough. I don't think you understand the fact that you're not doing anything right now. You're not doing anything right now. You're not even allowing me to speak about this right now.
So this brings me to a question that we talked about starting from this, and then we went with the conversation. But I want you both to please speak about, like, what is it like for you speaking now publicly in a way that maybe many of your friends and family would not look kindly upon?
Well, I think we've talked about this privately before, us and you, about the experience of being an outcast being very important for the process of radicalization. So I think we were always a little bit weird, a little bit strange. Now it's kind of, I have a reason to feel this way, whereas before I didn't know why I'm feeling this way. So maybe it makes sense more on the one hand. Of course, it's a very difficult experience. It's a very lonely experience. It's a very, we're still not sure where we're going to live, where we're going to raise our children. How is this going to work? It's extremely strange to be in a society and to be in such a diametrical conflict with it. It's quite a nightmare, actually. It's quite dystopian. What would you say?
Oh, yeah. I find it very hard to be so different from my family. A family that.
And I want to ask you, like,
Yeah.
because it's funny. Supposedly they're leftists, they're liberals, like Zionist leftists, liberal. They're all about let's all come together, Jews, Muslim, let's make peace. And yet there's still this abyss between us, and I feel that too. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Paradoxical.
It's paradoxical. It's painful. I keep expecting more from my parents, and a part of me just understands that I maybe I can't. Maybe they can't see the things the way I see them. I think a lot of them think that I'm brainwashed. That something bad happened to me, that
I'm brainwashing you.
That Dan is brainwashing me, that I'm part of a cult or something like that. And
every accusation from Zionists is an admission of guilt.
I think my parents think Alon is brainwashing me.
Also, my girlfriend's parents think that I'm brainwashing her. Maybe I am, I don't know, maybe I don't notice it, but I am brainwashing everybody around me. Maybe.
You're both such evil geniuses, yeah. I think it's also hard for them that I'm not religious anymore. Like the whole family is still religious. They're teaching their children. My brothers all have children. My oldest brother is more religious than the rest of the family. You know, I see my tiny nieces like.
That's difficult. I want to kind of circle back to the question, and actually, I realized that I have more to say. Being with our nephews, just because, okay, we don't see eye to eye with the parents, we don't see eye to eye with the siblings, but then the children, where they're babies, and we do get along because there's no politics there, and we love them. But then we see them grow up before our eyes, and we see all these labels put on them, and even the religious kind of costume, and then the political. We see them in the kindergarten holding an Israeli flag and saying this and that, and then we're kind of like, whoa, we're about to become like, we love each other now, but we don't know how long this is gonna last, and it's very painful.
Yeah, my oldest nephew, he's 18. He's in a yeshiva, a place where boys learn Torah, in the occupied West Bank. And he's training with guns right now to protect the settlement that he's in.
So this is
and
happening
he's
inside the settlement in the West Bank, right?
and he has been training for 3 years now, like himself, just like training his body to be a combat soldier, proudly so. Yeah, and I haven't seen him actually in a very long time. I'm afraid of seeing him. I don't know how I could look him in the eye, honestly. But my family, we're really trying to just continue loving each other, against all odds. But it also means that I have to be quiet about the things that I believe. I can't really talk about the things because that just will create explosions. And whenever I try to talk to my father or my brother, that Elik went to school with, they get heavily triggered. They're like, you can't use Holocaust analogies, you can't compare it, you don't know anything. Like they also they איך אומרים? מסבירים? They mansplain me all the time. They're like, you don't understand, little girl, this is how the world works. And they feel the distance, and I feel the distance. I feel like I can't really connect to them very much. Another layer of it, which is probably what we'll talk about in our next interview, my solar interview, is the spiritual distance, because I don't feel like I can practice Judaism anymore either, which is what my family is all about. So they continue to love and accept me, but there's this really weird distance. Yeah.
So I just want to make a comment because you mentioned this, that we talked about we want to do an interview with we are doing an interview with both of you to get like your general stories, and we think this is fascinating within itself. But we also have a plan to do like an interview with each one of you separately, where we go in depth into your personal story and also your knowledge about subjects that are related to this. Specifically, we're going to ask Dan about history, because you are a history student, right? And his knowledge about history. And we want to ask Ayelet about music and art and religion as it relates to Zionism. So to the audience, please stay tuned for that. And Elik, you had a comment that you wanted to say?
Yeah, I want to, before I ask, and maybe because I just thought that it's interesting that you said that like you grew up in a very liberal place, but when you speak like criticism, they're just like talking to you like you're a woman, shut up, you don't know, like all the nasty stuff kind of. And I also experience it, that, you know, like people who have like liberal beliefs, the moment you touch the sensitive point, they're not so liberal anymore.
Yeah, liberalism, it feels more and more like a thin veneer that covers up fascism and all the patriarchy and the militarism and all these things.
Suddenly they're not so feminists anymore. But I also I think like we kind of skip to the present, and I want to ask you guys the process that, because you describe your background, how did you started coming out of the cult, as we call it?
That's maybe the cracks that
The
that
cracks,
appear.
and then how did it came to full realization? Because I think that's very important too. So Dan, you want to start? Because we did like Dan, Ayelet, and maybe go back to you and then go back to Ayelet.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think my radicalization was two steps. First, I became, at least superficially, apolitical for many years, and then I got a push to the left, to the far left. So at first, like I said, I joined the military. I was motivated. I was very much in the story. Um, and then something did crack, and I'm trying to understand this till this day. So I don't know if I have a coherent story about it, but I'm going to try to figure this out with you guys. Um, at first, things worked out. Like I joined the military. I wasn't from the proper background to be a successful combat soldier. All my friends from the periphery, like children of immigrants, that usually they didn't join the military, maybe not at all, or not in combat capacity. It wasn't like a patriotic environment. My family was kind of unique. And I met mostly middle-class Israelis in the military who had more advantages. Sometimes they had preparations before the military. I didn't have any. So I had to prove myself there. And I did struggle, but I did become better and better. Um, and I was kind of distinguished for excellence in the different courses, and I did become an officer. And the height of this was when in officer school I received my ranks, and I was distinguished for excellence. And in every class of officers, those who are distinguished, they stand in the front, and when they reveal the ranks that you receive at the end of the class, the chief of the military, the head of the military,
Yes.
and sometimes the prime minister. In this case, it wasn't the prime minister; it was the security minister Avigdor Lieberman at the time, and the Ramatkal, the chief of the military at that time. It was Ashkenazi.
Yes, Gabi Ashkenazi.
They shook my hands. They revealed, and my parents were there, and my father saw me, and that was the height of everything. Like, there you go, I made it, perfect. Everything was going according to plan. A few months after that, my father was diagnosed with cancer, and a few months after that, he passed away. And I kind of wish he had, for a while, not today, but for a while, I wished that he had passed away at that time when, at the height of everything, because things started going downhill. My first position as an officer, I received I received a team to command. I was a commander of a small team, and I had a very difficult time
And this was a
because there
combat
was a
team?
commander, yes, in the
Okay.
combat capacity in the West Bank. My unit was
Okay.
operating in the West Bank, maintaining the occupation, and I had a very difficult time. Maybe it was just bad luck. Just the commander above me, just over me, was a very difficult person, a very abusive person, a sadistic person. It's a tough job anyway. And under this commander, I still kind of remember, it's a bit vague. It was many years ago, but I still kind of remember that as the worst time of my life.
Wow.
It was winter, and it was like the worst winter of my life. I was so stressed. I didn't sleep much. The job was very demanding. I could never rest because even if I had some time at home to be with the family, I had to be with the phone. Anytime I could get a call where they tell me you have to come. And at the same time, I'm facing this abuse and this derision from the commander above me. And yet I still believe in the story. I still believe, like, I'm not, I still feel like, well, I guess I'm doing something wrong. I need to do better. And nothing was good enough. Um, I couldn't understand why I'm not having a nervous breakdown because I wasn't sleeping. I was under constant stress. I remember going home because, every other weekend or every other third weekend, I get to spend some time with my family for the weekend. And I remember coming home, and on Sunday, which is here in Israel, that's the beginning of the week, of the work week, I have to go back to the base. And I remember just, I don't want to think about Sunday. It's like tomorrow or 2 days from now. And please don't remind me that that exists. I just don't want to be here. And my mother would ask me, so on Sunday, when do you leave? What bus do you have to catch? Just so she would know. And I told her, Mom, please don't talk to me about Sunday. And then I remember she still asked me, and this is very unusual for me with my parents, I just exploded. I screamed at her. My father was there, he saw it. I was just deeply, deeply distressed. And then my father got diagnosed with cancer, and then he passed away. And at some point, I was already with a different position in the military, but at some point so I signed a contract to serve a year, almost a year and a half more than the usual 3 years because I was an officer. So at this point, I had already served 4 years. I had only 4 months, 5 months left. And at some point, something clicked and I couldn't do it anymore. And I remember just showing up and telling my commander at the time, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm done. I don't care if you throw me in prison. And this was not ideological. This was not conscious. It was just my body.
Yes.
Today, in hindsight, when I look at slave rebellions, for examples, a lot of times it starts with the body. A lot of times it starts with us being lazy. That's what they call it. Because our bodies are like, and sometimes our minds are like, what's wrong? Come on, let's do this. But something in us doesn't allow it to us. So it wasn't conscious, but in my body, I couldn't do it anymore.
I just want
and
to kind of raise to the surface what is between the lines in your story, and please tell me if I'm correct in this. I think this is a great example of we always say that the Zionists are also victims of Zionism, and I think this is a great example because you were a perfect Zionist, right? The perfect model of a Zionist, and you did everything that was required of you with excellence. And still, you suffered because of this system. You suffered not like the Palestinians that you are part of the police force that kept the occupation of. But you still suffered and you still had a really rough time. And I think this is what we mean when we say that even the Zionists are victims of Zionism, because we all need to spend at least 3 years in the army. We all need to spend probably the best years of our, what should be the best years of our lives being slaves to a system. And maybe all of our lives.
And let's not down how oppressive it is.
Yes.
Super oppressive. Like to be in this system, like to get to a point where your body is like you need to be
screaming.
It's screaming, and your mind still says like you need to serve, but something so like you've been so oppressed, I guess, by this. And I feel I resonate also with this thing that before it's political, it's
personal.
It's personal.
Yes.
And I also had something similar that's like my rebellion started as an individualistic thing. Like I just just leave me alone, kind of.
Yes.
The wish to be left alone by the system before you start thinking and developing ideas. Yeah.
That was exactly it. So they eventually they were a bit shitty about it, but eventually they gave me the permission to leave. Maybe I should tell how shitty they were because I'm kind of angry about it.
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
All right, let's go for it. If it's too much, if you want it to podcast to be shorter,
to talk dirty. Yeah.
Yeah, talk trash. Yeah. So I came to the commander. I told him I'm not gonna do this anymore. He was angry. He talked to whoever backstage. Then they called me to the office of some higher ranking commander. I don't remember what the rank was, but I remember that was the rank that I would never talk to normally. So I'm kind of intimidated. It's an older man, a middle-class Israeli. I'm sure he had a beautiful home and a car and 2 children in the whole picture. And he sits there and he called me to the office. I came there. He was very friendly. So I was kind of disarmed. He was very friendly. He said, "I'm sorry about your father. Tell me about your father." And I go on about how much of a hero my father is, how I was a tough guy, and he was strong, and he would work out even through the chemotherapy. He would kind of work out and everything all the way to the end. And then he said something like, I don't think this quitting the military like you want to do now is something that your father would do or that he would approve of.
So
Doesn't sound to me like something that your father represented. And I just started crying. I think
And it
it
just
may
said,
have been the
"Son of a
first time
bitch,"
that I cried.
about that fucking high
Yeah.
commander.
I think it may have been the first time that I cried after it was right after my father had passed away. It may have been the first time that I cried. I don't remember crying before that. I just exploded. I remember feeling very embarrassed because there was another person in the office, and that person was kind of the assistant of this higher ranking commander, and I knew him. He was more my age. We were in the same we lived in the same rooms kind of, and I had to cry in front of him. And I don't remember how that conversation ended. In the end, they gave me the permission to leave. I left the military. It was very unceremonial. No goodbye, no nothing, just kind of bye. And I was, from then on for years, in hindsight, I would say that I was lost. I went to school, I did different things, but I was really lost. And like you said, Elik, I was just like, leave me alone. I don't want to hear anything about politics. I don't want to talk about this. I went and I studied philosophy, and I didn't study political philosophy. I studied like metaphysics. And also, I became more and more kind of drawn into irrational ways of looking at the world, mysticism and
Wow,
Buddhism.
we're so
And
similar in this.
I got into drugs.
Psychedelics.
So you didn't get into drugs.
You got me to no before that.
Stop. That's getting into drugs. You
No,
really
but later.
money.
Yeah, but I think I was fascinated with kind of other states of consciousness because I was looking to escape something. I had I say this today. I had this trauma or I had this despair. I didn't know what to do with myself in this world. That I was looking to escape. I had to believe that there's something else, there's something more. So I would do psychedelics and I did ayahuasca and then weed, a lot of weed, just daily. I became addicted, and meditation. And really, I was medicating, I was self-medicating I was looking for some kind of a solution to the problem that was me at the time. And
But the
'cause
problem wasn't
there was
you,
something
right?
wrong with me.
The problem was, if I may, that you were led into some specific course of development, of life development, a specific box, and then that box did not fit you. And then when you step out of this box, everything feels so confusing and you have no idea what to do, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think I was lost. I think I was over this abyss the whole time. And maybe I will already go ahead and talk about quickly about my radicalization because it really connects to that point
Okay, wonderful.
of so I'm going to skip for a few years. I met Ayelet. We went to Germany. I studied for a second degree, a master's degree in philosophy. She studied music. We were artists. We were going to make it. After about a year, I quit my program and I thought I'm going to be an author. I'm just going to write poetically, creatively, philosophically, autobiographically, and I'm going to make it. People are going to read it. They're going to like it. And that's what I'm going to do in life. And Ayelet's going to make it as an artist. But at the same time, I kind of knew that this isn't going anywhere. This isn't realistic. And that at some point our money's going to run out, and then I don't know what we're going to do. I don't know what we're going to do. So I just kind of escaped a lot of drugs. Then COVID came along, so Ayelet kind of joined me in this state of despair because her school was shut down. I'm not going to say too much because you might want to talk about it, but she kind of joined me. So we did a lot of drugs together. We were just kind of wild for a while, experimenting, meeting people, experimenting sexually, just kind of trying to forget that the world exists and hope that the money won't run out somehow. Um, and
I'm now realizing how much similarity, all like non-conventional Israeli experiences. Like we're all addicted to weed. We all try psychedelics. We all try to like break out of all the patterns, the usual patterns.
I also am having like this individualistic dream. I'm gonna make it as an artist and gonna make money, and you know, like I also had it. And yeah, it's all connected.
The stages of there are the stages of grief. There are also the stages of stepping out of the Zionist cult. I think it's there are a lot of similarity points.
But I think it's not just Zionism. It's some kind of like, I think it is Zionism, but it's many other stuff. Maybe we'll discuss it in there. But let.
I would say it's radicalization generally. And Zionist, our attitude towards Zionism is a part of that. But I think I want to hear more about your stories, but I think we were radicalized generally about the world and society and history.
Yes.
This happened to me finally when we were in Munich, and we were in this wild period, and we went out of our home. It was springtime, COVID time. We would just go to the park, into the river, beautiful nature, and do drugs. And I found a book. Someone had left several books on a bench in the street for people to just take. And they were all radical leftist books of various kinds. And just as a philosophy student, just as an intellectual, I was curious. I took a couple of them. One of them had a swastika on the cover. And
it's right here.
Show us.
Do we still have it? No, okay, we're going to show you the swastika.
Yeah, show us the books.
Now all the people who want
this is it. This is from Munich.
Are
okay, so this is the book. I saw a swastika. I was like, oh, cool. It says Fascismus Theorien, that is theories of fascism in general and German fascism in particular. And it's a person called Reinhard Kühne wrote this, a German author. He's not very well known. But he just wrote a book about explaining fascism from his point of view, which is a kind of a Marxist point of view, a socioeconomic point of view. And I just read this, and just at first, just intellectually, not very personally. I was like, wow, this is very impressive. This is very convincing. This is very empirical. This is the kind of explanations that I like. A part of me was like, wait, but isn't this Marxist? Isn't this? I knew that Marxism, no one takes Marxism.
Oh, the boogeyman of the USSR.
Yeah, it's kind of silly, but I was like, this is very powerful. And I kept reading, and that was it. I was ready for it. All those years of being apolitical, and then this came along, and boom.
wow.
Okay, so let me stop you, Dan, at this point to keep the tension again. And please, Ayelet, let's go rewind. I'm the director here, you see. So let's rewind, and Ayelet, please tell us about how your process of.
Just interesting how I also got radicalized by a book that suddenly came in the right moment, because you can read many stuff in life, right? And suddenly you read something and boom.
When you're ready.
Yeah, when you're ready.
Like I read the Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, you know, by Ilan Pape, and it's like changed it. And many people after told me, just one book, why you were taking just, but it's not that, it's that it opens something up. It's not that this specific book carries the whole truth about everything and you become like, it's not that I turn this book into a Bible or something, but it's shift something, like, I don't know.
Yes, it was the correct tool to unscrew to I don't know, to open the blockage. I don't know how to describe it, what the correct metaphor is, but it's the right thing at the right time.
Yeah.
So Ayala, please tell us your story.
So I'll fast forward a bit my army experience, but I will say that just lately I understood that, oh, I was part of Hasbara. Like I was in the educational part of the army, meaning I was in charge of, first of all, I went through a training which completely brainwashed me about history of the wars of Israel, of the IDF. And then I had to teach that to the soldiers.
Just the Zionist narrative.
Just lately, I was like, oh, I was head of Hasbara, basically. And I was in the army during Pillar of Hope, it's called.
Defense.
Pillar Amud Anan.
Amud Anan. When was
In
this?
English, they called it Pillar of Defense. That's how I heard.
Pillar of Defense, 2014,
Okay.
and
But
then
it's
no,
before-
2012, and then I was
Protective
also
Edge.
there during Sukeitan 2014.
Protective Edge.
Protective Edge and
Assaults on Gaza.
assaults on Gaza, yeah. But I was part of the Iron Dome unit. So for me, they were heroes, and I was helping the soldiers. And at the end of my service, I was shvuza, like I was sick and tired of it already because I just wanted to go and learn how to be an opera singer.
This is a spicy nugget of Israeli culture. So I want to explain this, please. Shavuz is an acronym for Shavur Zayin, which means that your dick was broken. This is what it means literally. And it basically means that you're fed up with the army and you can't take it anymore and you want to leave now. And I think every single soldier in the Israeli army has a moment where I am so shavuz right now. I cannot take it anymore. Yes. So please continue. But this was too spicy. I couldn't let it go.
Yeah. And but I wasn't changed ideologically or religiously. I was religious throughout my entire social army service, and I didn't go traveling at the end of my service. I went straight to the Academy of Music in Jerusalem, and I was intent on this individualist excellence course of becoming a famous opera singer. And during my studies, I met Dan. And for me, it was like, it will be an honor for me to represent Israel outside in the world. I was like, this will be my service to the world. I will represent Israel as an artist. I will bring honor to my family, to the Kagan name. My grandmother, who passed away already, was like a great opera fan, and my grandmother, who's still alive, is a great classical music fan. So for them, it was like, it was so moving to see me do this music. Completely apolitical and in this bubble of like sort of liberal leftist cute artists, queer people. And during my studies, I met Dan, and we connected very much on the fact that I was learning German because I wanted to continue my studies in Germany. He was learning German because for his philosophy interests, and that connected us very much. And I was like, I want to go study in Germany. And he's like, okay. So
I wanted to do that before as well.
That's true. So for us, it was like, we're going into the world, we're going to be exceptional. And then we're going to go like this to all the people who have ever hurt us and bullied us and doubted us. And that was the life that we hoped to have.
So just to clarify, at this point, you would define yourself, both of you, as apolitical, like not staunch Zionists anymore, but pretty much individualistic and apolitical,
No,
right?
but we left Israel knowing that we were going to come back.
I think superficially we were apolitical, but deeply we still had the ideas that we grew up with.
Yes.
Like that was our instinct. Like leaving in Israel, if you leave Israel and you live somewhere else in the world and you raise your children somewhere else, I'm telling this to the viewers, you guys know this, we call that laredet, to descend, right? And it's a shameful thing to do. You're a traitor. You left your country. And instinctively, we're like, we're not that. We're just going abroad for a while and we're going to come back. This is our country, even though we were apolitical.
And just the other side of this, the other side of it is aliyah, which maybe more people know. Aliyah means to ascend, and to ascend means to come to Israel. Yerida, to descend, means to leave Israel. So this is very telling of Zionist thinking, right?
Yeah, and I also want to add that many people in Israel go through this process that they become very individualistic after and they don't become radicalized. They just become like, you take care about yourself, your career, your family, and I think the system is designed to make you this way. That okay, we used you. Sure. Now you pay your part by actively participating. Now you pay your part by ignoring what's going on. Like I feel that and maybe you need to be really oppressed by the system in order to, I don't know what.
Maybe you need to feel like an outsider at some
Yeah.
point, so that you, like, the price for defecting is not as high if you are an outsider to begin
because
with.
there's really big psychedelic community in Israel, and people do ayahuasca and becoming spiritual and doing all this consciousness research, which I really still think it's interesting, but they don't do the extra step, extra mile of becoming politically radicalized. And maybe we can discuss it in the end, why it is so. You continue in your story, but yeah.
Yeah, I'll make it short. We moved to Munich for my studies. I got accepted to this like very prestige master's degree in opera program in Munich. It's a very rich city. It was like beautiful. Dan found like a super expensive apartment for us. And we were like, we are gonna make it. And I think that was the moment my body started speaking to me. I think that this is where the cracks started to show just in the whole story when I had two herniated discs in my back, and I had to have surgery, and I was in crippling pain, and I had to stop my studies eventually, even though I was doing well. Like, people liked me there. So I had to stop my studies. I went back to Israel to heal while Dan stayed in Munich. And after 3 months, he joined me in Israel. We got married. Which is so funny. Like, if we would get married now, I don't know if you would get married in the first place. And if we would, then it would not be the same. We had a lovely wedding, but I don't think we could have done it the same way.
Yeah.
Like, you had a religious ceremony. This is what you mean, right?
What?
You had a religious ceremony for your wedding.
Sort of, in our way. It was her mother, the rabbi, was the rabbi of the wedding. So it wasn't Orthodox. It wasn't recognized by the state of Israel.
Oh, really?
But it was Jewish in our way. And I don't think today we would even do that.
Yeah.
That's a thing which you meant.
Yeah. But then we went back, and I was already like strong enough to be like, okay, I'm going back to school. I'm starting my career again. We got married like legally in Prague. We did acid after that. That was interesting. That was also like the beginning of my experimenting with psychedelics. And my career was going really, really, really well. And then COVID came. And my school shut down. The contracts that I had were canceled. And Dan was like in a very lost place already. And I sort of joined him into this sort of madness. For me, it was super hard that I couldn't see my family. We were like stuck there. We didn't want to go to Israel because we were afraid we would get stuck in Israel and wouldn't be able to come back. I couldn't work. Like, I couldn't continue my stuff. It was like the future was so foggy, and I was like, I don't know when I'm going to see my family again. It was really confusing. And then there was this experience that I had of like a manic episode where I was like, I am going to be amazing, and I'm healed and everything's great. And then I thought I was going to win this singing competition. And I was like, this is it. Like, I'm going to win this competition, and everything's going to be great. And then I didn't. And then I experienced the depression side of this episode. And as Dan was reading this book and becoming radicalized by this book, I was depressed. And I remember him telling me about this book. And I was like, oh, it's just one of the books that Dan is reading. Okay. But then he like kept talking about it. And then he started listening to like Noam Chomsky, and he stopped smoking weed. He stopped taking drugs. He was just like, I have to re-educate myself. And I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? I don't understand what you're doing. And then he's like telling me. And I think the first heartbreak of this radicalization for me was understanding what America really is. Because I had a love relationship with America. I kept wanting to go back. I couldn't connect to Israelis. I could only connect to Americans. My boyfriends were all Americans. Dan, you know, was also into like American culture. And suddenly, like, to understand that America is what it is, which is like this crazy imperialist force in the world, and that capitalism isn't a good thing, was like mind-blowing and
Did you
hard.
also find out about the colonialist history of the US? Like, did you also discuss that?
Everything.
Everything,
All of it.
everything as a package.
Everything.
But
And
when
we
did you start, like Dan started talking at some point, like it got in, it sinked in, and you became also interested in this stuff? Like, how did it work?
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, I started becoming more interested. We started watching movies together, which I think is a medium that is easier for me than books. Documentaries. And stuff started seeping in.
I think because it also connected to our personal experience. So, for example, competition. What is this thing? You stand on a stage. What is this
Yeah.
thing where you sell your voice and you come to an enterprise, a theater, Ayelet, and you give your body and other people manage it, and you have to stand on stage and kind of sell yourself. And you felt in your body that it wasn't right. Like your body was telling you you were all kinds of things, digestion problems,
Yeah, I had
sleep problems.
many physical problems
I think
and
it's very
terrible
interesting.
anxiety.
And I started asking, you, like, maybe you're not the problem. Maybe the system is the problem. And that, because that was what it was for me. If I can take the
Yes, go ahead.
story over here for a
Yes,
second.
yes.
So
Yes, but I just want to
when-
make one small comment. I think it's very interesting, this theme that keeps coming back, that your body is telling you that something is wrong.
Yeah,
Like
you had it in the army.
yeah,
Yeah, it's interesting.
like the body knows that something is wrong, and the mind is controlled by the system. The ideology is injected into the mind, and the mind is telling you, yes, this is good. You should do this. You should do this, and the body, something in the body knows that it is not good.
This
that
is
it
my
is not
song.
right.
This is what my song about.
Which
Right?
song?
I
so
have this song when I'm talking about the killing of 3 kids in Gaza in Tzuk Eitan. When I say in Hebrew it works better, but איך אתם מצליחים להפוך את מה שלא מתקבל על הלב למתקבל על הדעת?
Yeah, how can you take
Wow.
that which is unacceptable to the heart
acceptable to the mind? Yeah.
Yes, yes.
So like there's inner force that tells you this is not okay, but you're still like the mind control is still there.
Yeah.
So that's perfect, because what the Marxist methodology was for me, at first it was just intellectual and interesting. And I was like, wow, this is powerful. And it's kind of everything is upside down. I want to relearn everything because everything was like kind of a fairy tale. And I want to understand how the world really works. But also, I think what it gave to me was, I think up until then, I was in peace with the world, and I was in war with myself. That is, the world was what it was. I didn't doubt that. I didn't question that. The world is the way it is. It was always, everything is natural. Everything is the way it's supposed to be. If there's change, it's evolutionary change. Everything is progressing. And today is the best day to be, the best time to be alive, because things are progressing. Technologically, we have phones, we have food, all of these stuff. Now, the world was fine. But then that meant that I was in war with myself. Because why am I depressed? Why am I addicted? Why am I unhappy? Why is my sexuality all messed up? And so I meditate, I medicate, I look for this philosophy, that philosophy. I go to Thailand, I go to Brazil, I do ayahuasca, I do acid.
All the new
and then
age
I read this
stuff.
book. Sorry?
Look, it's kind of what the new age tells you, is like you create your own reality. You need to work on
That's very
yourself.
capitalist.
Yeah.
So and then I started seeing the world through kind of radical leftist Marxist eyes, and I realized, no, there's a problem with the world. The world is not given. Let's look at the world again. It's man-made, and I do mean man-made. It's not natural. There's something going on here. People are doing this. It's not just happening. There's centers of power. There's minorities, powerful minorities, creating things for their interests, not your own interest. And I'm on the losing side of this. And that's why I'm having all these symptoms. And all of us are having all these symptoms. And yeah, so I was, that's why it was so personal for me. I kind of forgave myself. and really forgave everybody. Because I think the way I understand the Marxist methodology is you don't take things personal. Human beings are human beings. They're good, they're bad, they're stupid, they're smart. You don't explain history by labeling this or that. Just human beings. And what differentiates us is the conditions. I started looking at the conditions, and I started looking at the conditions generally and at my own conditions. For a long time, it wasn't about Israel-Palestine. That was too close to home. It was still sensitive for me. It was just about, let's look at fascism. Let's look at the Russian Revolution. Let's look at the French Revolution. Let's look at the English Revolution before that. Let's look at the Vietnam War in the United States, and let's be critical about the United States. Everything. And I kind of knew as soon as I will relearn, as I'm relearning all of history, as soon as I will try to relearn the history here, I knew where that would put me, and I wasn't ready to be a Smolani. I wasn't ready to be a leftist because of my father, the ghost of my father, because of this or that. I wasn't ready for that. But then a year had passed, I think. I'm being radical. I'm reading all these books.
Yeah, we moved to a different city in Germany. We moved to the top of Germany on the border with Denmark to a tiny town called Flensburg, which is where I, by miracle, got a job, was offered a job. And this was like, this is it. I'm going to be an opera singer finally. Like, even though my back broke, even though Corona, like, I'm going to do it. And I was offered to sing the Queen of the Night, which was like a dream role of mine. Like, it was all working out like amazing. And then we went there. And I noticed me being different after having gone through this change with Dan, this radicalization, noticing us as singers not being treated well.
Yeah. It's like the
And at the same time was the Shomer Chomot.
Yeah. So one of the assaults on Gaza
in
happened
2021.
It's crazy how many of them there was, huh?
Yeah, so many.
Yeah, it's insane. And we got the news of what was going on, and everything was really burning up. Like it wasn't just what was going on in Gaza at the time. Within Israel proper, within the Green Line, there was a lot of violence between Palestinian citizens of Israel and Jewish citizens of Israel.
Yes.
And we saw the footage, and everything was like saying, okay, now it's time to look at this. I have a responsibility to understand deeply and correctly what's going on here. And then, by the way, Elik, I read The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine by Pape. I read it in German just to practice my German, which was a weird experience. So I started there.
History, everything is mixed up.
It was very strange, yeah.
Yeah.
I started there and I kept reading since until today. Today, what I focus on in the university is the conflict, the so-called conflict. I don't think that's the right word, speaking about language. But I study Palestine, Israel. And yeah, by the way, I want to say that we all talked about this the being dreamers, like we're gonna make it. That was one of the things that I was critical about right away. Suddenly I saw, oh, this is some capitalist bullshit.
Yep.
Like, okay, you're poor, but don't worry, you're poor and there's millions of you poor people, but don't worry about it because I'm talking to you, right? The screen always talks to me, not the other guys, but to me. You're gonna make it.
You're
so
special.
don't. Yeah,
Not
the
like
system
that.
is okay. The system is a meritocracy, and if you want it enough, and if you work hard enough, you're gonna make it. And that was bullshit. And that was my experience. That was your experience. And I just started being critical about the ideas that I grew up on.
I still
Yeah.
want to, be an art. Like, what is B? I am an artist.
Yes.
Like, I want to produce more as an artist. But yeah, I also kind of disillusioned by like I'm gonna be, and I really developed. I'm still on process because I got really into libertarianism before. And into anarcho-capitalism. It was during COVID. Do you know this kind of theories? I still have the anarchic part, and about libertarianism we have many.
Yes, we want to do an episode where we do a debate where I present the anarcho-communist side and you
but
present
I don't know what I
anarcho-cap-
think anymore. Like during we talk now, I feel how much bullshit I got also like about this. Yeah, you're gonna make it. Like, yeah, I have.
I do want to say, just to balance things out, that when we talk, you also make great points that expose my lack of knowledge and the holes that I have in my story of anarcho-communism, even if it is the best story that I know, I don't know it well enough, and you definitely expose it. So there is a discussion to be had here, but I also want to, just to complete the picture, to tell my own story very quickly. I thought that I was going to be a famous mathematician. I thought that I was going to finish a PhD by the age of, I remember I had a plan, by the age of 27, I will finish my PhD in math. And yes, I'm very smart and very talented in math, and everything is going to work out fine. And I never finished my PhD, and I'm almost 37 now, so at least 10 years too late. But so we all have these stories of personal failures. We all personally failed.
Yeah.
All of us.
Yeah.
Together.
Yeah. Because during my time at the theater, it was just plain as day to me that I have 2 degrees in this. I am in the spotlight, but I am nothing but a worker in a factory with the least pay. I was paid the least from everyone. I was in the same I had like the same degrees, the same experience as the man, the tenor that joined with me. He got more money than I did.
30% more?
What?
30% more?
I don't know, like
This
a
is
lot
the
more.
right.
And
This
like
is the number that they cite, right? 30%.
yeah, it was like in the 50s. It was like being stuck in the 50s. And then I just generally started thinking about the opera world, which was for me like aristocratic and beautiful and cultured and whatever. And I'm like, oh no, this is actually entertainment for kings. This is what it started as. It was an entertainment for the king's weddings and ceremonies and just for their fun. And there was this moment that like we finished a show, 100th show that month, and I'm like bowing to the audience. I'm like, why am I bowing to the audience? And then I'm just like thinking that in the same opera, there's a king figure and we're all bowing to the king. I'm like, oh, this is because at the end of the show, the performers needed to bow in front of the king and hope that the king liked it. And the singers themselves, they were prostitutes. They were castrated boys. They were lower class people being used for their wonderful talent. And they got benefits. Of course, you always get benefits. You get the clothes and you get the food and you get the money and you get the name. But I understood that even the biggest opera star of the 20th century, Maria Callas, was a slave to somebody. And she died not so old, and she had no children, even though she wanted them. And she had to work all the time. And if she lost her voice and she couldn't make it to the show, people were furious at her. And it's like, I understood that even if I make it in this world, I will not be free. I will be a slave. And that was horrifying to me. And I felt it as I was performing, as I was going through something very difficult in my own life, and I did not want to be there, and I had to be there. And eventually I decided to leave this entire world that I dedicated almost 10 years of my life to. I had like a very similar experience of like going to the boss, who was a horrible, horrible woman who really manipulated us and used us and abused us. She forced us to do things even when we were sick, even when we were hurt. She liked me, and so it was very difficult for her that I wanted to leave. She was like, but what about the art? And I wanted to say to her face, girl, you're not making any art here. This is like Netflix for rich people. This is bullcrap what we're doing. And I'll also share something personal. I chose to go through an abortion at the time because I had an unintended pregnancy, which we weren't right for. And I remember I'm sitting in the theater dressing room waiting to go on stage. And I'm reading the news, and Roe v. Wade was overturned.
Yes.
The law in America that made abortions illegal or allowed certain states to make it illegal. And I was lucky to have had a relatively simple abortion experience. And I had found a woman that is called an abortion doula who could be a doula to me in this process. I did not know such a thing existed until that moment. And I was just furious. I was just sitting there and this fire ignited inside me of like, what am I doing here? Like there's people in the world who are not going to be able to access abortion like I did. And this was, I think, my first moment of activism ever, a feeling of like, I need to use my privilege to help others. And I don't think I ever felt that before. And that was like really my body allowing me to want to liberate myself. And if I want to liberate myself, that means I must fight to liberate others, because that clashes. And that's what that individualism does to us, like this individualism of like, no, I'm going to be amazing and fuck everybody else. It's like, no, I want to be free. I want to be healthy. I want to be happy. And so should everybody else.
We can't do it alone.
Yes,
You can't do it alone.
This is the tension between individualism and solidarity. And I think individualism is a good thing. It's a good thing to take care of yourself and to
express your uniqueness.
Yes, but if it doesn't come with solidarity, I think it is very dangerous. And this opens up the whole subject of neoliberalism and so forth and so on. But I want to please go back to the subject of Zionism and how all of this relates to the deconstruction of the Zionist ideology. And I think, Dan, we stopped at a critical moment in your story, so maybe this is the time to get back to that, right?
Yeah, how like
Yes.
you collected the radical ideas, how did you brought it back to Palestine? That's
Yes.
Well, as soon as I looked at things generally, radically, and kind of in a Marxist point of view, I had the sense that looking at Zionism through this lens would result with certain conclusions, which I was afraid of, so I didn't do it for a while. When I did start doing it, it did happen as I thought it would happen. It's very clear once you look at it with these tools. You just look, don't get lost, don't get distracted by religion, don't get distracted by ideas. Don't get distracted by personal things. Are good people, bad people, but the Jews were good people, the refugees, yeah, fine, everything's fine. Just look at the question of material, of resources. You had a people without land being pushed out of Europe. There was an excess population, an excess in Jewish population in Europe. That was the Jewish problem, so-called, being pushed out of Europe. A lot of them not knowing where to go, resulted in a lot of problems. And the idea was, we're going to go outside of the industrial world. You can't do this within the industrial world. You have to exit the industrial world, find a place outside the industrial world, and we're going to modernize that place. We're going to take the resources, and through being the agents of modernization in that, as of yet, non-industrial area, we will take the resources for ourselves, which is colonization. Once you look at it like this, it's very simple. It's a typical, with some unusual features, but it's a pretty typical story of colonization, of a settler society taking the resources from an indigenous society, with all the very much expected symptoms and results. You can look at North America, you could look at Australia, you could look at Ireland, and you see there's no Jews there, there's no Muslims, no anti-Semitism, and still pretty much the same story. Very simple.
Yeah, and this maybe when we make an episode with you, we're gonna attack these examples. We're gonna talk about them. But I want to say that the ideology also in the Marxist framework is important, right? It's not that it doesn't have, you just don't buy the ideology story, but you do look at the ideology and see how it serves
As a tool.
the structure. Yeah.
Exactly. As an expression of some kind of material base.
Yeah.
Yes, and I do want to point out how striking it is that Dan, you started telling the story of your parents who came to Israel, and what you are describing now in a very general forum and also Ayelet's story, like, and all of our stories, they all fit into this framework, right? It's your grandparents, my grandparents, your grandparents, they all came from places where they were rejected, and they thought that they would have a good future in this place, in Israel, in Palestine, in whatever you want to call it. So they came here because that was what they thought would benefit them materially. Yes. And once you look at it like that, it becomes so impersonal. Like, it is personal, but it also is impersonal. And then all the judgments and the more things, they start to dissipate, because we just understand that this is a system that is operating, and we are all victims of this system. And I think this is where you start to see the complexity and the simplicity of reality, and you can start looking at it with a non-judgmental lens, and just see how you can understand what is going on and make things better.
Yeah, and I think what I understand from talking to you guys is that the self-liberation, like, you can really easily get to a judgmental place towards our parents, our grandparents. Let's say they were selfish, they didn't see what they're doing to the Palestinians. But I think, like, from Marxist perspective, you understand that you cannot be happy as an individual if you don't also address the collective issue. And we are all also have been oppressed by this system. So it's not just about being good to others, it's also, but it's understanding that our own self-interest is connected to others as well. Like, I don't know.
For sure. And I think a big driving force for us is the fact that we want children, and we want to continue humanity, and we want to raise them in a place where they won't be brainwashed to be soldiers and to go kill other people, or to hurt animals, or to want to be rich and famous. Like, we want them to just know that they can be human, and that's amazing, and that's enough. And to be fully human, we want to allow ourselves to be fully human. And after the decision of leaving the opera world, long story short, we decided to come back to Israel, but knowing that if we come back here, we're not really going to belong, and we're going to have to fight for the equality of the Palestinians. Like, we're going to have to find the people who agree with us. And we did not go back to Jerusalem, which is where I was born and where I thought I was going to live forever. I used to love Jerusalem, and now I cannot stand that place.
Yes.
We live in Haifa, still trying to figure out this city. And we've been going to protests way before the 7th of October. Like, we've been all of last year, we've been going with the bloc that's against the occupation.
The radical
We've
bloc.
been trying to
the radical Gush Neged HaKibush, the radical bloc in the protest movement.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we, like, sort of trying to find where can we live if we're choosing to be in this society. Where can we live? Where can we be part of this society? And then, of course, the 7th of October came, and I knew immediately when the first siren sounded that the people in Gaza are fucked. That was like my first instinct. I wasn't even afraid for myself for a second.
Yeah.
I was just like, oh shit. Like, whatever's happening now is they're fucked. Like, they're gonna be severely punished.
Yes.
And it seems like so endless right now. Like, sometimes I think, like, Israel is like, when I talk to them, they're like, but the 7th of October, but look how you see the power differential. Like, there was an assault, but it stopped. And now there's like ongoing assault that just doesn't end for like a half a year. And and one parties keep like doing it and being armed by the most powerful state in the world, and there's no one who can stop them. Like, basically no one.
Yes.
Yeah, so we
Let's try to go to a more positive place.
Suddenly it dawns on me again and again, like how horrible it is. Like,
yes. There are no words for this. So I want to we've been talking for a very long time. So I want to start closing things, wrapping things up, and maybe the last question is what have you guys been doing in the last you said that you have been active in the last year or two, right? What have you been doing? What are you doing now? And what do you want to continue doing to make the situation better here?
Well, I think we're struggling, and I think it's working out, but we still have a lot to do. Find our people, to find our community, find the solidarity, to get together with people like you, to get together with Palestinians, to learn Arabic. For me, and I'm going to say for myself, like I said, I studied the so-called conflict. So it's about really understanding things deeply and simply, and being able to talk about it and show it to other people. And I'm having difficulties in my studies right now, some clashes with the authorities. We can talk about this maybe later.
You mean the academic authorities?
But in any case, sorry?
You mean the academic authorities, right?
Yes, I'm having some trouble.
Maybe we will all
In any case, I do want to become a teacher. And I hope to be able to become a teacher and make a difference in that way.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to have each of you individually and speak about, like, because I have so many questions for both of you.
Yeah.
Because I'm interested in both, you know, like the spiritual music. I think and also the historic. It's all connected.
But maybe the audience does not know about the spiritual music, so I want to encourage Ayelet to tell us about this, so that we can actually understand.
I will tell more when we talk about it later. I've been trying to bring to create spaces where Jews and Palestinians can pray together. Because I've rediscovered the power of prayer in a non-Jewish way, and the power of singing together, and I did a prayer circle with my own music in Jerusalem last week, or 2 weeks ago. And it was mostly people from like my mom's community and my friends and my family. It was lovely. It's like prayers that are influenced by things that I studied of like feminine power and feminine energy. And then I wasn't expecting that a friend of mine would be there who has a good friend who's Palestinian from the West Bank. And he was there, which was insane. And one of my songs, which the words are, it's a question, which is, how do we transform fear into love? And I was planning on singing it just in Hebrew, but it's been translated into Arabic. And I saw him there and I was like, I'm going to sing it in Arabic too. And he sat there and just cried. And that made it so clear to me that I don't want to do this hippy dippy shit. I want to bring people together, because the spiritual and the political, they have to be together.
Yes.
And being together and praying together and feeling in community is so strong. It's so powerful. And we don't have to talk a lot. We don't have to go into our stories, and that's also important. But let's just be together. Let's sing each other's languages. Let's just feel the power of the music. That's another language. And just for a moment feel like we're okay. And I have this utopic dream that one day we're all going to live together in one state or two states, or I don't know, and it's all going to be okay and we're all going to be safe. Maybe not in our lifetime, but if we can create the space where we can come together and in that moment feel safe, then that would be worth it.
Yeah.
It's powerful, yeah. And I thought like if you disconnect the spirituality from politics, we get what you remember we talked about it
Empty spirituality.
with Daniel Mate, that
Yes.
you have this Nissim Amon, this super Zen going to teach the soldier how to bomb houses and to breathe while
Yeah.
The spirituality can become so corrupted.
Yes. Yes.
that it's yeah.
Okay, I think this is a
That's
good
enough.
point to to end this
Maybe
conversation.
we can go on and on with
We could go on for days.
Yeah.
But this
And
is
we
good way to
will.
talk.
We will finally meet in person soon, and then we can talk as much as we want and be
Yes.
in community.
Yes,
Yeah.
but this is the problem with our podcast, that they can go on forever, and I always have to be the bad guy who stops it. But I take this responsibility, and I will do the job that is.
You're a good bad guy.
Yes, I'm a good bad guy. So yeah, so I want to thank the audience for anyone who stayed this far. Very impressive, and thank you. And I want to thank Dan and Ayelet for being such amazing guests, and for this like really enlightening conversation.
I enjoyed it a lot.
I must say that I feel like I understood much more about myself, about where my environment through this conversation, and sharing our experiences and comparing our experiences. And maybe if you have some final words, Dan and Ayelet.
I just want to say thank you for your bravery, for speaking out, for being brave, for posting on Facebook difficult things, dealing with the consequences. I still feel like a coward because I can't really do it, but maybe this is the first step. So thank you for giving the platform. Yeah, I don't know who's gonna watch this. If it's anybody I know, I love you anyway. Please love me back. And thank you for giving the platform. Thank you for doing this. And I hope we can continue collaborating to do more.
Yeah, I want to say something similar, that after the 7th of October, I mean, things were difficult before, but after the 7th of October, things became very totalitarian in Israel, and it's not easy to speak out. It's dangerous. And that's why we saw each other, because you spoke out, we spoke out a little bit, and that connected, and how important that is. So thank you for the courage. And I want to hear more about you. It's the end of the episode, but we're going to meet soon, and we're going to learn more. We're going to hear more.
Yes, so many of the stuff you said resonated with me as well.
So much.
Both of your stories. Yeah, it's like, yeah, so it's interesting.
So let's finish here. Thank you, everybody, and peace. And justice.
Peace. Power to the people.
Power to the people. Yeah.
Okay, bye-bye, guys.
Bye.